All right, everybody. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia. And I have my very good colleague and good friend back. Her name is Dr. Brittany. Dr. Brittany, would you like to say something and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me again, Dr. Alicia. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Dr. Brittany Henry. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Brittany Henry. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today about the Black church, mental health, and marriage.
Yeah, so that's the title of our discussion today. We're going to talk about the Black church, we're going to talk about mental health, and we're also going to talk about marriage. And I think it's really interesting because just last night I was on YouTube with another good friend of mine. I've been friends with her since college,
Oh, y'all go
and
back.
we were psychology majors together.
Mhm.
And we've been diving into all of this stuff for a very, very long time. She's a clinical psychologist, and her name is
Mm,
Dr. Chris.
okay.
So we both became good friends and got our PhDs, and we became therapists. And we work, we work in the field. So last night we were talking about Krishan Rock. You
Mm,
familiar with her?
yes.
She's a really interesting person because on one hand you see her at the VMA Awards, or you see her at these music awards, and she has
Hmm.
one foot into dressing, real skimpy. She
Hmm.
is twerking on stage.
Yeah.
She's drinking and smoking. And to my understanding, she was drinking and smoking while she was pregnant,
Mm,
which is a problem.
yeah.
And she has another foot into this interesting past of a lot of trauma and a lot of mental health issues. She has all
Hmm.
of these things that
Yeah.
she's struggling with.
Yeah.
But what was interesting about her story is when you go on her Instagram page, you see that she's in church
Mm,
and she's baptizing her baby in
mhm.
church. And you could see her like, really in worship and dressed in
Mm,
all white, and she's beautiful and talented. And when you see her in that space, you
mhm.
see the potential of what she could be. And we talked about this whole contradictory sort of thing that she's in, and how there's this sort of internal struggle because
Mhm.
she really does, based on just behaviors that we see. We don't know because Instagram is not therapy, YouTube is not therapy, this is not therapy. But
Exactly.
what we can see, she probably could use, a little bit of an intervention in terms of her mental
Mhm.
health. But one point that I made last night was that you can't pray your way to good mental health. And, God puts in your path individuals who are trained and skilled. And there actually is a cure for depression, so to speak. There's a cure for anxiety, and there's treatment that actually works with pretty
Right.
robust outcomes.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to talk about that because these are some of the challenges that the Black church faces. Like
Yeah.
this preacher, I don't know if you saw the baptism of this baby, but this preacher
No, I didn't see
delivered a message
it.
from
Mhm.
his soul. Like he was
Mm.
like, bless this child and bless the mom and bless the dad. Like he was really giving
Mm.
probably a deep seated, it's probably like one of the best christening he could ever do in terms of
Wow.
baptism,
Mhm.
because he was speaking from a place where he really seemed like he was very concerned for this child and for the
Mm.
parents, and wanted
Mhm.
that whole family to
Wow.
be healed. So that's a long story to get into my question for you today.
Yeah.
When the Black church, like this man,
Mhm.
who this pastor who was baptizing Krishan Rock's baby, when you have people in your congregation who you come across with mental health issues,
Mhm.
what are some of the challenges there in getting the help that they need?
So I think that's a really important question. And I think sometimes this is kind of a taboo topic. But I think one of the main things is understanding and reconciling the whole person, the whole self. So we have the spiritual side, yes, we have a physical side, but we also have our mental side, and understanding that if there are challenges with the mental health, it's not a crisis of faith for the person. You, like you said, you can't pray yourself out of depression. I mean, you can pray through certain things, but at the same time, there are different coping skills. There are strategies that therapists can provide you with to maintain health, to get better. And just like with our physical bodies, if your body is sick, you don't keep saying, all right, well, I think I'm healed and I'm not going to go get checked out and I am not going to take this medicine. You're like, okay, this is information for me to figure out what's going on and what needs to change. Our mind is part of our body, right? Like it's a whole body. So we still need to go and get support. We still need to get checked out. We still need to see what is going on with me so I have the resources to be whole and to be better. And I think that's one of those challenges that we see in the Black church sometimes. And oftentimes it stems out of a lack of education and understanding. And I think also a lack of access. Oftentimes, if you have someone who has a very strong faith, a lot of times they want, especially in the Black church, you might want a Black therapist because they might understand my lived experiences better than someone who doesn't look like me. Or you might want someone who has some kind of a faith-based background so that they understand as well. But how many times do you see Black faith-based therapists available and accessible to Black churches? And so oftentimes you see pastors that are taking on the role of kind of helping and counseling when they should be referring out. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it's a very delicate sort of situation because even as a social work educator, we do get and I work for a faith-based university. And so we get a lot of people who want to become social workers and therapists, but they're just like, you have to believe in God or I'm not going to be able to work with you. And they have these biases. And especially when it comes to stigmatized groups like LGBT populations and so forth. And I'm just like, hold on a second. That's not what social work is about. Like, you have to, your faith is important to you as a therapist. Yes, we get it. But at the same time, you can't be judgmental and you have to be able to meet people where they are. And if they're agnostic, what do you do if you come across somebody who's different from you? It should not make a difference in terms of your practice and competence and all of that. So, it's just, the church comes across a lot of the stigmatized groups. I mean, because we know the Black church, the choir director in the Black church,
you don't go there.
They're having a little sugar in his tank. And I'm like, why are we not talking about the elephant in the room here? This happens. I've seen this firsthand. And also with mental health, that's also somewhat stigmatized. So I'm just curious about what you'd have to say about any potential stigma like that makes it kind of sticky, when it comes to mental health treatment, particularly among people who have a strong faith.
So I think, and again, it goes back to feeling as though there might be a crisis of faith if someone is struggling. And I'm like, you can have anxiety and you can have depression. You can struggle with those things and completely have faith in God. There's not, I think sometimes we don't realize that there is the intermarriage of our different parts of ourselves rather than this disjointed, well, if I am anxious, if I am depressed, then I must not have faith. That's not true. And unfortunately, sometimes we're taught that. And sometimes we believe that because we feel as if I didn't pray, if I would have prayed more, maybe I wouldn't feel so sad. And it's like, no, there could be some chemical stuff that's going on internally, and that's not your fault. And it's not a moral indication if something's going on with you either. It doesn't mean that you're not as firm morally or something like that. Again, like you said a few moments ago, God has given us all kinds of people and tools and skills, and it's okay to then seek out the help, especially with trained professionals to figure out, well, what's going on? Why is something feel off? And how do I then recalibrate it to get it on track? Is it with medication? Is it with talk therapy? Is it with understanding new strategies, understanding my triggers, understanding my trauma, and my family of origin? What did I come from? And why do I make the decisions I make? And that's helpful. And it has nothing to do with your faith.
Yeah, I really love that because I see so many people with anxiety. And it's all through the Bible not to worry.
Yeah.
Like all through the Bible, it says, please don't worry about anything. I have actually a list of the Bible quotes that has to do with don't worry about anything. Don't be anxious because God's got you. Jesus got you covered. And what does that do when you have crippling anxiety? It's like saying, okay, well, I must have this anxiety. That must mean that my faith is in question.
Yeah.
And it's not, because you just talked about chemical imbalances in your body. And it's also, anxiety is related to parenting. You know, did you have inconsistent parenting? Did you have, did something scary happen to you? You know, that can cause anxiety, right? So it's not, you know, it makes people further feel like there's something wrong with them as a person, because they can't get around it on their own. The whole thing about anxiety. Why am I worrying so much? Why am I scared to leave the house? Or why am I scared to answer the phone? And why am I being crippled by this? And I'm supposed to have faith. I'm supposed to have faith. And so it can further kind of stigmatize all of these very real situations and issues that come up. So thank you for that answer. That makes really good sense. Did you want to add to that?
I was going to say, with what you were just saying, like, why do I have this anxiety? Why it's crippling? When you talk to a therapist, you can dig into, where do you notice that? When did you first experience it? And it's information that then helps you to figure out, okay, so this is some of the strategies that I've already used to cope. This is what's been effective. This is where I need some support. And again, it's just information to help you be the most whole version of yourself that you can be. And it's not about, oh my gosh, I'm not following the scripture. No, it's okay to get help, you know. And there's a scripture that says, my people perish because of a lack of knowledge. Information about ourselves helps us to do better, be better, and experience better.
Yes, that is so beautiful. Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming in. I see a nice big crowd here. Everyone, Joe came in and said, good afternoon, everybody. So hello, Joe, Joseph, Jude. I just want to say hi to him. Thanks for putting a comment in the chat. But anyway, so before we go on to our last question, I wanted to ask you about self-care, because I have my own self-care practice, because I am working with, 7 days a week. I feel, well, it is 7 days a week. I'm working in this area of teaching students, and students, they come with their own sort of stuff, right? I have to read their journals and read, they're disclosing all of these things because they want to become therapists. In order to be a therapist, I'm teaching students, you got to have your own self-care, right? And I'm listening to some of their stories and reading some information about their past. Like, that's what brings them to this field, right? They're a lot of times wounded healers too, right?
Yes,
and so I deal with that, and then I deal with my own clients the other times of the week. And so I do things for my own self-care. I was on the phone, like, trying to schedule my next retreat so that I can
love it.
meditate and take some time out. But I'm just curious for you, what is your own self-care plan?
So for me, I am my best when I am in nature. Anything in nature. Like, I actually will be planning a trip pretty soon to go over to Sedona and go to the Grand Canyon and all of that. That's one of the things for me. And practicing mindfulness, being aware of, what am I doing? Do I need to slow down? Why do I feel so, okay, let me breathe, let me focus. Even things like massage, that's a big part of my self-care as well. It's important because as healers, in the sense that we take on so many other things from people, sometimes we hold things in our body as well. And so I even notice myself sometimes, like, I'll sit like this. I'm like, why am I so tense? Slow, okay, calm down, and even those things for us are helpful to kind of get that out for our own bodies, our own selves and things. And a lot of journaling. I do a lot of journaling to make sure that I'm expressing myself and getting it all out onto paper, so it doesn't have to be inside. I'm trying to think of anything else. And a lot of travel. Travel is good for me, because then you get to go and be in nature in different areas and all of that as well. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So that are wonderful. I'm going to share your story with my students when I meet with them this week about self-care and how important it is, especially when you start getting into some of the stuff that we in contact with. Oh gosh,
Absolutely.
it's so much. And we want to make sure that we're able to show up for our clients. And we have to practice what we preach.
We do. We absolutely do. And
Yeah.
especially for me, like most of the populations I work with are highly traumatized.
Yeah.
So it's very important for me to make sure that I'm dealing with my own stuff, my own self, in order to be as effective for them as possible.
Yeah, very good. Well, okay, our last question that I have
Mhm.
for you is it's really comes from some of the couples that I see in my office, because
Mhm.
I specialize in couples work. Okay. And I get a lot of couples who come to me after receiving pastoral care
Mhm.
for a long time. And although they are given really good biblical
Mhm.
foundation on how to treat each other and the whole issue of submission and all of these
Mhm.
things that's in the Bible, I'm finding that, by the time they come to me, I'm having to like really work with a lot of them
Yeah.
about, I really appreciate the fact that they went to their pastor and received
Mhm.
help in the church.
Right.
But I find that, in a way, although I have seen a lot of pastors start to wake up and say, oh, we need to get a professional in here. I can't just do this on my own. Right.
Yeah.
So I have seen, and I'm looking online and social media where a lot of congregations are inviting therapists to come in and talk. And I think that is beautiful, especially when it comes to couples retreats and
Mhm.
couples work. So I'm just curious about, from your perspective, where do you see couples work in terms of seeking help with their marriage? And it's, for to some extent, it's placed in relation to, well, you have to stick together no matter what happens in the family. And there are some very disturbing things that I'm seeing in these families. And I'm not
Mhm.
certain, as a therapist, I'm not attached to the outcome of whether
Right.
you're going to be together or not. I'm really interested in the process and self-actualization and all of that. But I'm curious about, how what your perspective is on that part.
Okay. Well, one, I want to say I commend the pastors that you have seen, well, the couples that have gone to pastors where they actually have said, hey, we need some support, because there are limits to pastoral counseling. And biblical advice is wonderful, is necessary. But at some point, we do have to say, we need a referral out. We've got to get some professional help here. And I think one of the main things to remember is, yes, the family structure is sacred. Couples are sacred. Marriage is sacred. However, in an attempt to honor God, you can't look at manipulation, abuse, coercion, any of those things and say, okay, but under no circumstances can you split, because this is not healthy for the person. This is not healthy for the family unit. This is not healthy for children to see parents involved in these kinds of interactions, because then what does this teach the next generation? They're going to continue complete, these cycles. And oftentimes, in churches, we talk about breaking generational curses. You break generational curses by breaking generational trauma. And you understand generational trauma by doing the work and digging in and saying, you know what, this was dysfunctional. Just because I learned it, it didn't make it right. And just because we continue to practice this, it didn't make it right. And then you choose to do something differently based on the education you receive. And oftentimes that comes in therapy. And so for families that are trying to just stay together without any type of a chance to separate and like redefine what are roles and goals and all of that, I think it's really important to say, okay, but is there abuse going on? And abuse is not just the physical. There can be emotional abuse. There can be financial abuse.
Yes.
There can be all kinds of things going on. And if you're noticing any of that, it is to not be you recommending that people stay together at all costs, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. And it's just so funny because there's some factions, and it's not all, I don't, all religious people and even
Mm-mm.
pastors don't, like, I've seen some pastors say, okay, this might be enough for the two of you.
Yeah,
Like, I've
yeah.
seen some pastors do that, but there is some thinking that says it's the wife's duty to hold it all together. And I've seen this even in some really like very interesting scenarios and of abuse,
Yeah,
in between
unfortunately.
the couple and in the household. And I think what's fascinating is that when we look at the research, the entire body of
Mhm.
research, okay,
Right.
family structure means a lot, but it's
Mhm.
not the only thing. Like, all of us have a past.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean that your future is determined by your past. And
Right.
what's important is making sure that you are valid children who grow up in homes where their parents are happy and secure and
Mhm.
loving and giving and responsive, and not having to be in a place where there's a bunch of chaos going on.
Mhm.
Those kids turn out better. And I think that that that's what the data tells us.
Right.
That's what research, and
Exactly.
I love research. And so that makes it such a conundrum. But as long as you have two people in the as a couple, head of the household, the two people who are head of the household who really want to work on things, I'm going to be there with them. But
Of
if
course.
there's
Yeah.
someone who is putting everybody in danger, I'm with
Exactly.
you and a lot of other pastors who are saying this is the end of the road sometimes, because it's unhealthy.
Right.
Yeah, it's a
No,
conundrum.
it is. It absolutely is. But safety is paramount, and
Yeah. And
that
safety for the
is
children and for, yeah. And you're right. It's not even just physical safety, it's emotional, it's psychological, and financial safety too, because there'd be some very damaging things that we've seen.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you, Dr. Brittany, coming up here and getting on YouTube. We're live on YouTube today. There's no video recording. I really appreciate you coming here and having a conversation with me. This is a wonderful topic, and I just want to say, come on, we gotta do more talks.
Listen, I'm here for it. I'm
Yeah,
here
because
for
I
it.
mean, I think it's just so important for the public or anybody who's interested in this, and anybody who's struggling through some of these very real issues of religiosity being really high with you, and you still struggling with some things, and you have faith is important for you. There are other ways to deal with
Mhm.
what's happening inside of you in this internal conflict and struggle. So anyone who's listening, you can always contact me at Coaching with Dr. Alicia, or you can contact Dr. Brittany Henry if she is, she's someone that you'd like to work with. And you can follow us on Instagram, Dr. Brittany Henry on Instagram, and then I'm at Coaching with Dr. Alicia. Any last parting words before we say goodbye?
I will say there's a book that I would love to recommend. There
Mhm.
is, because the last time you asked me about a book, and I was like, okay, what books would be good for this? But I got one today.
Okay.
But it's called "Are You Really Okay?" and it's by Deborah Filetta, and it says getting real about who you are, how you're doing, and how it matters, and it's about emotional health, mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. And it's a really, really, I'll show it to you here. It's a really, really excellent read. And I very highly recommend it because it gets real about all the different topics and how it all comes together into the whole self. And I think it's really important for people to be able to see all the different parts together and not just kind of take the different pieces and I'll focus only on spiritual, I'll focus only on physical. It's all together, and it's very enlightening. So that would
Oh,
be
very nice. Okay.
love
Are
for
you really okay? And who is it by again?
Deborah Filetta. She's actually a licensed professional counselor. And there's some scripture references in the book, but it's very, very comprehensive. It's very good. It's Fileta is the last name.
Okay. Fileta. Okay. I'm going to get that book.
Yeah, no, it's a good
Uh,
read. It's
it
good.
is a good read. I love therapy books like that. I read
It's a
a
good read.
bunch of them. I have one that I'm reading now called Co-Creating Change.
Mm,
Woo!
that
Dr.
sounds. Who's
Brittany.
that by? I'm like, I need to write that one down.
Co-creating change. I'll take a picture of it and send it to you. Really,
Okay.
it gets down to it. It's
Ooh.
very psychoanalytical, but it
Okay.
is really wonderful, and it talks about the therapeutic relationship in a
Mm,
way that it's stuff that we already know, but it's great to like read it again and just
okay.
see it, have someone else describe some of the things that we already know, and
Hmm.
it's a great refresher. I will take a picture of it
Okay.
and text it to you when we're
Yeah,
done. So
that's
you're
perfect.
you're not done with me yet, Dr. Brittany.
I'm fine with that. I'm here for it. I am here for
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, we got Cherie, Joe. Hopefully, Joe still hanging in here with us. And we got Devin, Morrow, and DeBlue. Thanks for coming. Oh, look, he has a comment. DeBlue. Oddly, it's always put on the woman. My mama didn't work, my wife doesn't. Oh, yeah, holding the family together is put on
Yeah.
the woman. That was a very good point,
Very
the
true.
blue. Anyway, so thank you for leaving comments in the chat. We appreciate it. And thank you again, Dr. Brittany, for coming on here. And
I
goodbye, everybody, and we'll see you soon.